Hey, Catherine.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
We acknowledge that we were founded on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaronk, the Mississauga and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and now live on land that is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We have many representatives working across this land now known as Ontario, and we acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory. We are grateful to be able to work and live on this land, and thankful to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial, and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and to all communities across the province. To continue to center reconciliation, we encourage our team, partners, students, and teachers to take time to learn about the lands they are currently on. Visit native-land.ca for more information.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Honeybees and Pollinators virtual field trip. I am Cassidy from Eggscape, and I am so happy to have you all here with us today. Today is especially exciting because next week is Pollinator Week, a time to celebrate the amazing animals and insects that help plants grow. Did you know that about 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we eat depends on pollinators? So take a moment and think about what you had last night for dinner or for breakfast this morning, and chances are at least one of those foods relied on a pollinator. Pollinators are animals and insects that move pollen from flower to flower, helping plants to grow and reproduce. So today we are going on a very exciting virtual visit to Backed by Bees in Burlington, Ontario, where we will meet Dave the beekeeper. He'll show us the fascinating world of honeybees and help us discover why pollinators are so important to both our food system and our environment. As always, please put any questions that you have into the chat. We would love to hear from you, and Dave would love to hear the questions that you have for him. So without further ado, we will get started, and please join me in welcoming Dave from Backed by Bees. Hi, Dave.
Hi guys, how you doing today? I'm pretty excited here, and thanks so much here in one of our main bee yards. And so, pollinator week is always such an important week for us. There's lots of different pollinators out there, and we're going to highlight the honeybees today. But I am going to give a special little head nod to a group of pollinators that maybe we actually don't talk about enough. And believe it or not, all you guys sitting in your classrooms, you guys are actually pollinators too. But no farmer is going to pay you to come on out and pollinate just like a honeybee, because the honeybees are just so much better at pollinating than we are. And so the cool thing is we actually pollinate pretty much the same way that honeybees do. And what makes honeybees and butterflies and solitary bees, bumblebees, lots of our other classes of pollinators so good is most of these insects are actually really hairy. And when they fly through the air to go visit a flower or go collect water or figure out where they are in the environment, as they fly, they actually pick up a static charge. And so that static charge is just the exact same thing as if you guys have ever been to a birthday party and rubbed a balloon on your hair and then stuck it on the wall. That charge, that attraction is the same thing that helps pollen from the flower stick to the honeybee or other pollinator. And then eventually, just like that balloon falls from the wall, the bee loses her charge and that pollen will fall off. And we just really hope it's on the next flower that she visits. And so you guys are actually good pollinators too, whether you have cotton and natural fabrics in your clothes, or if you just got a full head of hair. As you walk around, you're going to pick up a static charge too. And if there's pollen in the air, that'll stick to you. As you walk around throughout the day, you might lose that charge. Some of the areas we may lose some of that charge is if we get into a school bus or if we get into a car, the rubber on the tires actually helps us lose our charge. And then when you open your door at home, you might actually have some of that pollen come off. And if it ends up on the right flower, you guys are pollinators too as well. But the reason why we're just not nearly as good as honeybees, and we put our lab coats on and nerd out for a second, the reason why honeybees specifically, along with other bees in general, are so good at pollinating is they have hair on one part of their body that pretty much nobody or nothing else in the world has. One hair on one part of their body that nobody else has. And believe it or not, that's their eyeballs. And so honeybees have super hairy eyeballs. If you ever get to see a picture up close or see them under a magnifying glass, that's what makes them so good, because when they get down into the flower and they're head first and they're sucking up nectar, all their hairy eyeballs actually pick up pollen. And then when they go to the next flower, well, they stick their head right back in that next flower and some of that pollen can fall off on there. So pollination is extremely important, just like Cassie said at the top. The cool thing is if you guys had strawberries or blueberries or pretty much any berry or melon for breakfast this morning, you guys can thank a honeybee. And if mom and dad or brother and sister had a cup of coffee, next time they drink one, I want you guys to tell them to thank a honeybee as well. But what I'm hoping to do is actually show you some of these honeybees behind us. And the cool thing today, kind of cool, is we're going to see a heck of a lot of honeybees, because here in Burlington yesterday, we had a lot of heavy rain yesterday afternoon. And when the flowers are open during the afternoon and they get hit heavy with rain, they actually don't produce any nectar for about 24 hours after that. So these flowers around here won't actually start being worked by honeybees probably until tomorrow, which is Thursday. And so what that means is these bees are bored. They're all hanging out at home. So we're going to see a heck of a lot of honeybees today at home. They might be a little scratchy. They might be a little bit aggressive. And I would say they're going to do that because, well, they're just kind of stir crazy. All these bees are designed to work and bring home pollen and nectar. And when they can't do that on a day, well, they go a little stir crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves set up so that we can go into the beehive. And the first thing you're probably expecting me to put on here is probably that big white astronaut suit that you see beekeepers in all the pictures. I could not imagine wearing that astronaut suit on a 30-degree day. Can you imagine last week when it was 40? We would be sweating our guts out. And so we actually typically don't wear that as beekeepers. What we normally wear in Ontario, because our bees are so nice, is we normally just put a little hat on that makes us look like we're going on safari. So it's got a big wide brim. And so that brim plays an important role, because when we put on our face net, or what we call our veil, over our big safari hat, that big brim pushes that veil off of our face, and now we're super protected from the honeybees. So it's protected on all sides, and most of the time, the bees are actually in such a good mood that they're not even going to worry about our hands or other parts of our body that are bare. Now, I'm going to take this off because I'm going to hope to show you some of our nice bees here. The other tool that we always use is this tool here, probably the most iconic piece of beekeeping equipment, and this is the smoker. Now, if we were doing a little bit of myth busting, I would actually probably get you guys to guess what this does. And most of the time when people guess, they guess things like, well, they've heard that it puts them to sleep or makes them docile or it makes them kind of dopey and they don't care about the beekeeper. It actually does none of those things. In fact, this smoke, I don't think using a smoke is that much different on a honeybee than it is on you guys. If I were to come to your classroom and puff smoke right into all your noses, we probably wouldn't be best friends, but I could make sure that you don't smell anything for a couple of minutes. And that's what we're going to do inside this colony is we're going to try to jam the radar, let's say, of these honeybees. So if one bee woke up on the wrong side of the bed and she was a little angry, she couldn't make a smell that goes around the colony that tells all the 80,000 other bees in that colony to get angry with me and go get him. And so that way we only have to deal with one bee instead of 80,000 bees. Now, behind me in the picture, you guys are going to see all these different stacks of honeybees. And in class, you guys probably hear these things called a whole whack of different things because everybody has a different term for what we're looking at. I have heard everything from brood box, to brood chamber, to bee nest, to beehive, to bee box, to bee colony, all these different things. But the way we talk about them as beekeepers is this is a beehive. And just like some of our families are bigger than others, these bee colonies will be bigger and smaller. We'll have a variety of them. But what's standing behind me right now is probably about 2 million honeybees in total. And again, most of those are home right now because their day hasn't started. And so what we're going to do is we're going to protect that because I don't want to deal with 2 million angry honeybees. So what we're going to do to get our smoker started is we're going to grab a piece of yesterday's newspaper. We're going to crumple it up and just leave a little tail so that we don't burn our fingers. And we're going to light that on fire. And we're going to put that into our smoker. Now we want that to get nice and hot. So I'm going to puff away at the bellows to make this nice and hot. But what we don't want to do, obviously, is flamethrower our honeybees. They're such great pollinators because they're hairy all over. You burn a bee's hair and she's not going to do much work. So we're going to get that nice and hot. In order to make sure we don't hurt the bees, the next thing we're going to do is just put some pine shavings in our smoker. And what that does is it puts out the fire. And now that smoke is actually so cool that I can keep my hand right in it and it's not going to hurt anything. So we're going to fill this right on up. And then the last thing we're going to do, because eventually the fire and the embers are going to burn their way to the top, the last thing we're going to do is grab some green grass and put that on top, almost like a filter. And now when those embers hit that green, wet grass, they're going to go out instead of being thrown into the colony. And this, believe it or not, with a one small hand tool, we're farmers. We're some of the only farmers out there who don't use tractors on a daily basis. This is everything you need in order to be a good beekeeper and work with these bees. So come on over and let's open up a beehive and see what's going on inside. Come on over. Yeah, you want to plug around the back. So we're going to go around to the back of the colony. And the reason being that we go to the back, I have Molly here with the camera with me. If we're standing at the front, we're basically, it's like a mob standing out front of our school or out front of our, house at home. And that can be a little unnerving. It also is the main area of traffic for these honeybees. So if we keep that clear, they're going to be in a good mood. Now I have my smoker going. I'm going to puff 2 puffs of smoke into the entrance of this colony. And that just tells the bees we're here. And if any of those guard bees are a little upset, they're going to quiet right on down. We'll take our lid off. And we're going to take our first box off. And we're going to come back to this box at the end. So now you can see we're into this colony. We have lots of bees staring up at us because the roof just got ripped right off their house. So we're going to give them a couple of puffs of smoke, and now let's get down into the heart of the colony. Perfect. And so the colony will come and go. It'll shrink and grow throughout the year. This bottom box is always the heart of the colony. So in the wintertime, if you happen to see beehives out in the farm fields or come to a beekeeping operation, these tall 6-box tall colonies are going to all shrink down to about 1 box. The reason being, it's a lot of real estate to keep warm if we have lots of space on that. And then hopefully I can get you guys jazzed up about this piece of equipment. This may look boring, but this is probably the coolest piece of beekeeping equipment. It revolutionized the beekeeping industry because what this does for the pollinators and why it helps their structure, their colony, is this is big enough that the worker bees can crawl through, but the queen bee can't. And so what that means now for these honeybees is the queens down below, that's where they need all the pollen to stay. The pollen is protein for their young to grow. And so they keep her down there. They keep all the pollen up there. And now they don't need to worry about storing pollen in other areas of the colony because they're just not growing any young up in those other boxes that I took off. So that is called a queen excluder, and it gets every beekeeper excited. Oh, cool. So we actually have, hopefully we can get this on film. So this here is a bee with pollen on her legs. You can see that orange ball. We don't get to see this very often. So what actually happened was this bee, maybe yesterday, was out and she worked on some sort of flower. Now, to me, that looks like pollen from what we would call a ditch plant. It's spurge. And so she's come back, she scraped that all off her body. So she had pollen all over her eyes, her back, her legs. And she uses her back legs to scrape it into the ball of pollen. And she actually has a special little, almost looks like a comb, a hair comb, on her legs. And that's where she sticks the pollen to. She then has to get another bee to come along and basically slough that pollen off. They nudge that, they headbutt that pollen off, and then store that, and they can feed that to their young bees. So that's pretty cool. There's a bee with some legacy pollen on her. And here is what a frame of honeybees actually looks like out there. So these bees mainly on here are all going to be worker bees. So they're female, and we call them worker bees because all they do is work. From the second they hatch as an adult, they work so hard, they eventually die in the field. They're working so hard. These bees are geared up to work. It's not anything we ever have to tell them to do. They just work, work, work. And so we'll get a close-up of one of them. But one of the other really cool bees that never gets enough attention inside this colony is going to be this boy bee. And so this boy bee, this is a drone. And this boy bee, we can easily tell the boy bees apart from the girl bees because if you look at his face, his eyeballs basically go around the entire top of his head. He's got those massive eyeballs. And he needs those big eyeballs because he has to be the one lucky boy that can go and find the queen bee in the air and beat all the other boys to him. The other really cool thing, we talk about some of the great foods that bees pollinate. Did you know that honeybees are really delicious too? So we can always play around with them. I'm just kidding. The drone bees, actually, we can do that and play around with the drone bees because they can't even sting. So the drone bees are entirely geared up in order to reproduce and make more bees. They actually don't do any of the work inside the colony. Their mouth parts are actually so small, they can't even feed themselves. So they rely on the girl bees in order to feed them in the actual colony itself. So go ahead.
Awesome, Dave, so far. This is amazing. We're about halfway through. Do you have time for a couple questions?
Absolutely. Fire away.
Awesome. So Madame Nichols' grade 2 class is asking, how many flowers can one bee pollinate in one day?
One bee can pollinate. So it all depends on how far apart the flowers are. Or if we really get nerdy and we say how many florets are in a flower. If you look at things like sunflowers, goldenrod, clover, there's multiple flowers on one small little flower. But in a day, the common numbers that we work with is one bee can make 3 trips and pollinate about 1,000 flowers per trip. So
Wow.
that means in one day, one bee can pollinate about 3,000 flowers.
Wow, that's a lot. Very cool.
Yes.
We'll do another question.
Awesome.
Some class is asking, how do they make the honeycombs?
So how do they make, so really cool. So honeycomb, the beeswax, the hard beeswax that we make candles and shoe polishes out of is actually just honey that the bees have produced. And then they eat the honey and convert it into that solid inside their body. So beeswax, believe it or not, you'd probably be the weirdest person I've ever met, but you could go to the store and start chewing on a beeswax candle. And it's really just honey that's changed its actual, composition. It's a natural product, but it's just honey that's been turned into a solid by the honeybees.
Wow.
And the cool thing about it is, although we associate the honeycomb with the honeybee, believe it or not, honeybees do not make honeycomb. They do not make hexagons. Honeybees actually make circles. And then because it's so warm and they pack so many into a frame, they actually melt into hexagons. So they actually make circles instead of hexagons.
Very cool. I did not know that. Wow. All right, we'll do one more question and then we'll keep moving along.
Perfect.
Someone is asking, how does the boy bee communicate?
So the boy bee really doesn't communicate in any other way other than by smell. So if he comes back from a trip outdoors and he's all dirty, he's going to actually make a smell that tells all the other girl bees, I'm dirty, come lick me up, come clean me up. So he's going to communicate entirely by smell. The other worker bees are able to communicate by smell too. And if we keep on going, the cool thing is probably one of the biggest things that bees are known for outside of honey is the special way that they talk with inside the colony. And they talk by dancing. And sometimes we're able to come out here and see a bee dancing. But again, because they're not really working today, we won't be able to see that. But what I'd love to do is take 2 minutes and teach you guys a bee dance. And so for those of you in the class, if you have space, what I'm going to encourage you guys to do is get up out of your chairs, give yourself a little bit of space. And what we're going to do is we're going to dance like a honeybee. And this little dance I'm going to teach you, believe it or not, actually has 7 different pieces of information in it. And so in order to be a good bee dancer, what you need to do is you need to be really good at shaking your hips. And so you guys can wiggle your hips back and forth and wiggle your hips back and forth. And when you wiggle your hips, what you're going to do is you're going to take 3 small steps forward. So wiggle your hips, and 1, 2, 3. And then what you're going to do is you're going to stop wiggling your hips and you're going to turn around, stick your tongue out, and you're going to move all the way back to where you started by going to your left. And the idea being, well, you just hit some really good flowers. That nectar tasted really good. You're basically going to try to get all your sisters to try a little bit of that nectar from your tongue. So you're going to stick your tongue out and then walk around. And then you're going to come back to where you started. Now, you told all your sisters on this side, you need to tell all your sisters on your right side. So you're going to shake your hips. You're going to take 3 steps forward. And then you're going to stop and you're going to do the same thing and go around to the right. And so if you put that together, you have a great Friday night dance. What you're going to do is you shake your hips. 1, 2, 3. And you're going to come back to the start. You're going to shake your hips. 1, 2, 3. And go to the right. And so that is how bees talk. And depending on what direction, so you come on back closer, Molly, depending on that waggle, if you did it straight up on the frame or down to the side, that tells the bees what direction they need to fly to find the flowers. How long you shook your hips for is going to tell the bees how long they have to fly. How fast you shook them is how excited you are, how much of a great resource it is. There's 7 unique individual pieces of information in that waggle dance. Really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shake off a whole whack of bees. If we zoom in, hopefully we can do this in the light. If you guys look into that frame, what you'll see is a whole whack of different colors of almost what looks like Play-Doh. And that Play-Doh all down in here is actually all pollen. And you can see their different colors. And what those are going to come from is just different flowers. That's what the different colors are going to be. So let's go in and see if we can find the queen bee. These bees are actually acting really good today. Better than I had expected. And so this frame, you can see a little bit different. There is a queen bee on here. And instead of playing a big game of Where is Waldo, I'm going to point her out. And this queen bee actually has a white dot on her back. And so she is always somewhat hard to show off because her whole life she lives in darkness. And so when we expose her to sunlight, she actually spends all the time running around trying to find somewhere dark to hide. So she buries her head under her sisters, her daughters, or not her sisters, her daughters. And then that white dot, we probably get the most questions when we show off the queen bee about that white dot. She's not born with that white dot. That's actually something beekeepers put on the queen bee so that we know how old she is. And so every queen bee born in the world this year, if the beekeeper adheres to it, will put a white dot on their queen bee. And so if you guys, I don't know, tonight start to call up beekeepers and say, hey, I want to buy a queen bee. If she shows up with a white dot, you know she was born this year. If she shows up with a blue dot, you know she was born last year. So we go through 5 colors, and that's how we can tell everybody how old these queen bees are, because they're not like us. They don't shrink when they age and get wrinkles. They look the same the day they hatch as an adult and the day they die as an adult. But really cool, the last thing we'll see here on this queen bee is if you can look really close, and hopefully the screens show up, you look really close, you can see her butt or her abdomen actually starting to pump away like an accordion. And what's actually going on is as I hold the bee, I can hold her by her head, and we're not going to risk, suffocating her, because she doesn't breathe through her mouth like you and I. She actually has all these little tubes down her abdomen, and that's as she's pumping away. That's just like you and I breathing. She's bringing in, puffing out, and then she's blowing out, and that's what's actually causing that to move. But as a queen bee, she's the most important one inside this colony. The cool thing is, there's really not much of a genetic difference between her and all the other workers. So she's the mom only because she got lucky. Now, if let's say I happen to remove her or squish her or something bad happened to her, they can replace her with another queen inside that colony. And so the queen's a girl, the workers are girls. If I happen to squish her, they're going to take some larvae, some developing young that were going to be worker bees. They're going to pick 10 to 20 at random, and they're going to feed them royal jelly instead of honey. Now, you guys have heard about royal jelly. It's one of the most nutritious foods out there. And so what that basically means is those workers that were going to be workers, they got fed better food, and they just developed further into queen bees. Now, there can only ever be one mom inside the honeybee world. And so they're going to try to raise 10. The first queen that hatches out, her first job in life is to go around and make sure there's no other moms. She's going to walk around and kill all the other queens until there's only one left. And then she's going to go out, mate, and try to establish that colony from there. So that's pretty cool to see. Let's see. Yes. Kind of cool. We actually have on here, we have some bees that are emerging, which is always fun to see. So if you look at my hive tool, on the tip of the hive tool, right here, what you'll see is a bee actually chewing her way out. And so like caterpillars are not the only insects out there that actually spin cocoons and then have to chew their way out. Oh, here she comes. These bees get in there, and if I open this up and help her out, what we're going to see is a brand new adult bee. So we'll watch her. And here's a bee open to hatch out. Maybe I just need to help her out a little bit more. Here she comes. There's a brand new adult bee. And so on a day like today, if we spent all our time out at this beehive, we would see that happen about 2,000 times. That queen bee is going to lay 2,000 eggs every single day, except for the dead of the winter. And that's why these colonies can grow, and they can be 80,000 bees strong inside there. So you can see on this frame alone, all those brown paper bag materials, all those cappings underneath there, there's all pupa that are going to hatch as full-on adults. Now, again, because we're exposed to the light, their behavior changes. But normally, if it was dark and that was a normal situation, that bee that just hatched, she would turn right back around, get her head inside that cell, and clean out everything inside that cell. So it's ready for the next egg laid by that queen bee. So they really are workers. They actually work before they actually go and eat anything.
Wow, that is so cool. I have never seen that before. We have about 10 minutes left, and we still have lots of questions coming in. Did you want to answer 2 or 3?
Let's do a few. Yes, for sure.
Okay. Someone is asking, how much honey does a bee make in its life?
So one bee herself makes 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in her life. So basically, like half a drop is what that bee is able to make. Really cool. We finally figured it out. So if you look at 1 pound of honey, basically a jar of honey the size of my fist here, that'd be about 1 pound or 500 grams. If you paid all those bees minimum wage in order to make that 1 pound of honey, that jar of honey would cost $187,000. So it really is a team effort to make honey. And these bees here can actually make 300 pounds of honey in a year. They eat about 200 and they always just leave about 100 pounds of extra honey. And that's what we're able to take and put on our pancakes.
Wow, very cool. Someone's wondering, does the size of the bee matter regarding how much work they can do?
So the size of the bee it will in general, not in the honeybees. So the honeybees are actually stunted by the size of their cell. And so they actually can't grow anymore. So there's no difference inside the colony. But if we're talking the difference between, let's say, a bumblebee and let's say a honeybee, yes. The bigger the bee, generally what ends up happening is those bigger bees can tackle the bigger flowers. So bumblebees can tackle tomato plants. They can tackle roses, lilies, poppies a lot easier than honeybees. And because those flowers are bigger, they can actually get a lot more nectar and pollen off those flowers as well. And so they can do proportionally more work that the bigger those bees are as well. They just got a lot more hair. They can pick up a lot more pollen for sure.
Very interesting. All right, we'll do one more question and then we'll let you move on. Someone is wondering, where do you put the bees in the winter?
That's a good question, and one we probably don't get often enough. So believe it or not, these bees live out here all year round. These colonies are permanent. They have been in the same location probably for the last 7 to 8 years. And so this bottom box is where they live throughout the winter. So we take all the extra boxes off. So this yard goes down to one box, 24 boxes of one box, and they huddle. They basically huddle down inside those boxes and they shiver to keep nice and warm. And so the cool thing is honeybees, they can survive really cold winters. We had a really cold, tough winter this year. We had one of our best overwinterings in a long time. And so they huddle down, they keep nice and warm. And the reason why we like to keep them outside versus bringing them inside is if we have things like power failures and all of a sudden fans aren't blowing fresh air on the bees, we can suffocate bees indoors pretty fast. Also, these bees, they need to fly outside of the hive and they actually need to be flying in order to go to the bathroom. And so if you're inside in the dark and you can't fly, you might have to hold your poo inside of you for about 5 to 6 months. And I don't think that's very good for the honeybees. And so what happens in the wintertime around honeybee colonies, if we get a really nice still day, the bees can fly out, quick go to the bathroom, and they can jet back home really fast. And so the beekeepers, we go out and we see yellow and orange snow all around the beehives. We actually think that's a really good thing because that means there's somebody alive inside those colonies that's going poo. I didn't think I'd be talking about poo on a Thursday, but that's what happens in the honeybee world.
Very cool. Awesome. We have about 5 more minutes or so left. If there's anything else you'd like to show us before we have to say goodbye.
Why don't we look at, so really quickly, why don't we look at some honey as well?
Sure.
So these top boxes, if you guys remember, they were above the queen excluder, meaning that queen is down below. She cannot get through that grape. So anything above, including these 2 top boxes, only worker bees can get through there. And why that's so cool is that means I now know in your jar of honey, there's no eggs, there's no larva, there's no pupa, there's no bee guts. There's nothing like that inside your jar of honey. So A, it keeps things really clean. But B, it also makes it really easy for me to tell what I can harvest and what I can't harvest. And so on this frame alone, let's shake off some of the bees so we can see what's going on. We actually have a frame that's starting to fill up with honey and nectar. Honey is not something bees collect. Honey is something bees make. And so all along the inside, in the middle of the frame, this is all going to be fresh nectar that the bees are bringing in off the clover flower. Up at the top where you guys see this capping, it looks like a paper sheet all along the top. That's actually going to be honey underneath there. And the bees tell us when things are ready to be harvested. If it's nectar and there's no cap on it, it means it's not ready. The bees haven't put the lid on the cookie jar. And what is probably going on is there's not enough bee spit in it, and there's still too much water in it. And if we just harvested that, it could ferment, it could do a couple other things. But once it has that wax capping on, That's just like you guys putting the lid on your Tupperware at home and keeping it stored for a long time. Now, the other myth when it comes to honeybees is honey lasts forever. And they finally figured it out. It will technically last in the jar forever, but it's not edible forever. It takes just over 1,000 years, and eventually that honey actually turns into a bit of a toxin, and you can actually hallucinate if you eat some of that honey. And so honey, fresh is a bit of a relative term when we talk about honey, but that's going to be the difference between nectar and honey. One last really cool thing, and then I know you guys have lots of questions. We don't get to see this all the time. You guys see these two little, almost they look like upside down peanuts. These are little queen cups. And so if I happen to squish the queen bee or something were to happen, they have the ability. These are emergency queen cups. They would just pick up some larvae inside their mouths and they would stick them in there and try to raise them as queen bees. And so because the queen bees are bigger, they just need bigger size cells. So that's what those two little things are. They're emergency queen cups. So I'm going to put this one back in. Really cool. These bees typically don't love being open for more than 3 minutes at a time. So these girls have done amazing. But now I'm definitely open to some questions.
Awesome. That was amazing. Very cool. We are running out of time, but we do have time for about 2 to 3 more questions before we have to unfortunately say goodbye. Someone is asking, when did you open your bee farm?
I'm not old, but I'm not young anymore. I can say that because I've been beekeeping now for 16 years. And so I started in the backyard as a bit of a hobbyist. And then I started my first commercial venture and I jumped immediately up to about 350 colonies. And then we founded Back by Bees. And now we keep just under 1,000 colonies all around Halton. So I've been doing it for 16 years now, if you can believe that.
Wow, that's amazing. Someone is wondering, what flower is their favorite?
Perfect. What flower is their favorite? Right now, clovers are honeybees' favorite in Ontario. So this little guy, you guys are going to notice from all your backyards, all the sports fields, probably in the schoolyards. This is white Dutch clover. And it's one of the biggest crops where the bees are able to work on. And if you look at it, next time you see one of these guys, take a look at it. What you're going to notice is it's actually made up of a whole whack of little flowers. And so what's so great is the bees can go to one flower and they can tank up on 50. The other really cool thing for you guys, if you guys actually want to experience what life is like a bee, is you can grab some of these white tips, pull them off, and if you guys just nibble on the little green end, you'll notice it's actually quite sweet. And that's going to be what the nectar, that's where the nectaries are inside that flower, and you guys can taste just like a bee as well.
Very cool.
And one last really cool thing, I don't know if you guys can see that, there is a stinger. So I did get stung. It happens all the time. As beekeepers, I typically get stung anywhere from 4 to 40 times a day. 40 would be a really bad day, but that's all it is. So you can see on there just a little venom sac and then the little stinger. So that's how you can tell if a honeybee stung you.
Wow, very cool. All right, we have time for one more final question. How did you get into this role, and how might a student watching get to where you are?
Yes. So how I got into this role was I basically stumbled into it. There was a big honeybee research center. There still is in Guelph. It's actually the largest honeybee research center in North America. And I was walking through the woods, happened to stumble into this bee yard, and then I met the manager and volunteered and instantly fell in love with honeybees. And I think what's so cool about it is even after 16 years, I still only know this much. We're learning so much about these bees every single year. Now, when it comes to getting into things like farming and things like beekeeping, let's say, is it takes a person who has a lot of resilience and is willing to try something and learn from their mistakes really, really quickly. There's no formal education route to become a beekeeper. And so for the most part, most people get into it either 2 different routes. Number one, what would be very common for the agricultural world in Ontario is definitely handed down through the generations in a family. If mom and dad weren't beekeepers, then your other option is really just, you're going to go out there and you're going to buy a whole whack of bees and you're going to figure it out really quick. There are some small local organizations that will help you out as well, kind of beekeeper consortiums. But it really is, it's you get thrown right into the fire and you got to figure it out really fast. And you just got to hope your passion holds so that you can keep on going through the hard times and then really get to the good times.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Dave. For those watching who are interested in this pathway, this has been so incredible. Thank you so much, Dave, from Back by Bees, for sharing your knowledge and giving us a behind-the-scenes look at the world of honeybees and pollinators. I know I've learned so much today, and I hope all of you watching have as well. Before we say goodbye, Dave, is there one final thing or comment that you'd like to share before we sign off?
The one thing we always tell everybody is there's room in Ontario for every single pollinator out there. So the best thing you can do, it may seem small, but plant a flower. Even planting one flower makes all the difference in the world. So plant a flower and you'll be a pollinator hero.
Wonderful. I totally agree. Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you, everyone at Back by Bees. And thank you to everyone tuning in and watching today. As we celebrate Pollinator Week next week, remember, like Dave said, even those small actions like planting a flower or learning more about your local pollinators are great ways that you can make a difference. Teachers, if you'd like to continue learning about honeybees and pollinators, there are additional resources and activities available on your teacher portal. So thank you so much, Dave, but unfortunately we have to go. We hope you enjoyed today's virtual field trip, and we hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us. Bye, Dave. Bye, everyone.
Bye.